guys, hey, welcome back to another Sunday School. We are so glad to be back with you. Hope you all are doing okay and hope you had a great second week of school. Now today's story is from the book of Joshua. And Moses, who we met last week, you remember, has died. And Joshua is the new leader of Israel. Now the story begins with the peoples, and they're still wandering in that desert. But today they're about to conquer the city of Jericho and claim a new homeland that is in the area that is now Israel. Today we are excited to have Paul and Mary Pritchard back with us as our musical guests. We want to thank Chinawa and Kibwe for doing communion this week. You guys did a great job. And Kibwe, make sure to wish Chinawa a happy birthday this week from all of us. Know that we love you, and if there's anything that we can do for you or your families, let us know. Today we are going to resume the quizzes, and the quizzes here for our series this time are going to revolve around the previous week's lessons. So the quiz this week will be about last week's, Moses and Abraham and all of that. Well, we hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy Sunday School. See you next time.
Here's our Old Testament Odyssey quiz for today. What was the name of Abraham's wife? Was it A, Sabrina, B, Samantha, or C, Sarah? Announce your answer. The correct answer is C, Sarah. What was the name of Moses' sister? Was it A, Mary, B, Miriam, or C, Magdalene? Your answer? The correct answer is B, Miriam. And last question. To convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, God sent A, plagues, B, soldiers, C, a year's supply of food. Your answer? The correct answer is A, plagues. Thanks for taking the quiz.
The story of Joshua. After the death of Moses, Joshua took his appointed place as the new leader of the people of Israel. It was his task to lead his people into Canaan, the land the Israelites had refused to enter when they first saw it. Joshua sat looking into the distance. The landscape before his eyes shimmered in the heat and the mist that rose up from the river Jordan in the valley below. He was not so much looking as remembering the time when Moses was still alive and he was one of the band of brave young soldiers sent out to survey the land. It was the time of year when the grapes begin to ripen, and in the 40 days they had spent exploring, the fruit had turned from pale green to a deep, luscious purple. That's it, they had said. Let's find a huge bunch of grapes and take that back to the camp. Yes, that'll convince everyone, they had agreed. We've had enough of hanging around wondering if we should move into Canaan, but our families will need a reason to take on the challenge. In the morning light, the young men had found the biggest bunch of grapes they had ever seen. It was so large they had had to strap it to a pole so 2 men could carry it between them. They had picked pomegranates and figs and returned in a mood of great celebration. Then, as they had stood before their people, their spirit of adventure had died. All except one of Joshua's companions, the faithful Caleb, had lost their nerve. It's a fertile land, they had reported, but too well defended. We could never make it our own. Joshua remembered his disbelief at the way his friends were behaving. Now it was his turn to lead the people to that same land. For a moment he wavered. Then came a new thought, a thought so loud he knew it must be God speaking to him. Joshua, no one will be able to defeat you as long as you live. I will always be with you. I will never abandon you. Obey the whole law that my servant Moses gave you. Don't be afraid or discouraged, for I, the Lord your God, am with you wherever you go.
Spies. Joshua was filled with enthusiasm. He gathered the leaders of the different families of Israel together. Let us all get together, he said, for in a matter of days we will move into Canaan. He sent 2 men ahead to spy on the land. Go to Jericho, he said. Find out what you can that will help us take the city in spite of its mighty fortifications. The men idled their way past the gatekeepers in the busy daytime. As evening fell and the inhabitants of the city returned to their homes, they fell to wondering, where could they spend the night without being noticed? People are beginning to look at us, one whispered to the other. That old man has had an eye on us the whole time. And that woman there, she's been gazing out of her window for ages. As they looked up, the woman smiled. Then she smiled again. I get the strong impression that the lady is asking us to spend the night at her place, grinned one of the spies. So they went to the house of Rahab, a prostitute. Meanwhile, news about the strangers reached the king, and he sent an urgent message. Rahab, the messenger whispered, the men in your house are Israelites. They have come to spy on our land. They plan to invade it. Bring them out. Rahab's smile was coy and charming. There are 2 men who came here, she said, but they left at sunset before the city gate closed. They can't be far. The king's men left in pursuit, and Rahab hurried to the roof of her home. She rummaged among the bundles of flax that were lying there to dry. Wake up, she whispered to the men she had hidden there. I know your people are strong enough to capture our city. I've saved you from the king's men, and I can tell you where to hide in the hills so they will not find you. But when you return in battle, spare me and my family. The men agreed and gave her a red cord to tie as a sign at her window when the battle came. Rahab's house was built into the city wall, and she let the men down to the ground outside. So they escaped to return to their people with their news.
Into Canaan. The day after the spies returned from Jericho with their report, Joshua ordered the people of Israel to strike camp. Today, he said, we cross the river Jordan into the land of Canaan. The priests went ahead, carrying with them the precious Ark of the Covenant, which contained the terms of the agreement between God and Israel. The priests stepped into the river. As they did so, the waters stopped flowing and gathered into a great pool far upstream. The people of Israel walked into Canaan on dry land. Then God told Joshua to command the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant with them out of the river. When they reached the bank, the waters that had waded upstream surged forward with a great roar and plunged down the riverbed to the Dead Sea.
The Battle of Jericho. The Israelites made their camp on the plain near Jericho. It was time to celebrate the Passover meal, the yearly reminder of God's leading them safely out of Egypt. The next day, they prepared their first meal from grain that had been grown in Canaan. Meanwhile, the king of Jericho had ordered that the gates of his city be kept shut. Around the walls, his soldiers were on alert, ready to hail arrows and stones on any attackers who might draw near. From their vantage point, the Canaanite soldiers saw a blur of activity near the Israelite camp. They heard an eerie wailing. At the head of the column were armed men, but following them were priests clad in white robes, blowing a mournful, tuneless sound on a ram's horn trumpets. Behind came more priests carrying a box that was slung on poles. At the end came a long line of soldiers walking with a slow, deliberate tread. The sentries on the walls gripped their weapons. The procession came close to the walls, then circled the entire city. Then it went away. There was no attack. The same thing happened the next day, and the next, for 6 days. By the 7th, the guards on the city walls were less tense. I suppose those wandering beggar people think they are scaring us, they crowed, shaking their fists at them with amusement and disdain. Joshua's little army wore battered clothes, and the weapons they carried were simple and old-fashioned. But this time, the procession did not leave. It went around the city twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. How much longer would this go on? 7 times. Then a shout, a blast of the trumpets, a great cry of triumph from all the army. Suddenly, the masonry was crumbling under the feet of the guards. There were screams and shouts as the walls collapsed. The Israelites marched in and took the city in a deadly attack. They found Rahab's house and brought her out to safety with her family. They searched for precious metals, gold and silver, bronze and iron, to take as the spoils of battle, and they burned the city to the ground. From that day on, Joshua led his people to victory in the land of Canaan. He divided the country into different territories and cities, so there was a home for each of the 12 families descended from Israel. When, after many years, the people were settled, he called their leaders to a solemn gathering. He reminded them of the faithfulness of the God who had guided them through the years. Now, said Joshua, you must worship the Lord and serve your God sincerely and faithfully. Are you prepared to turn away from the gods that other nations worship? You must decide. And for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. The people all agreed to do the same, knowing that he had completed the task he had been given. Joshua died peacefully at the age of 110. We talked today about the walls of Jericho that came tumbling down several thousand years ago. More recently, 31 years ago this November, shockwaves went around the world when another wall came tumbling down. The Berlin Wall was built by East Germany in 1961, supposedly to keep Western fascists from entering East Germany and undermining the socialist state. But the main reason was to stop mass defections from East Germany to West Germany, which offered many more freedoms. The wall kept many friends and even families apart for 28 years. Finally, in November 1989, the people had had enough. They started chipping and hammering away at the wall as East German soldiers stood silently and took no action. More and more people came to the wall to help tear it down. It was a joyous time for Germans on both sides of the wall and marked the beginning of the reunification of Germany. It's just another story about how even the strongest walls can come tumbling down. Sometimes we build up invisible walls with people around us, even the people we love. It takes hard work to break down those walls, often through determination, forgiveness, reconciliation, and most of all, love.
Greetings, friends. Well, I know you're back in school, and I hope that's going well for you. My sister is a teacher back in Massachusetts, and I know she has found it challenging doing all this distance learning. So I hope for you it's going pretty well. I'm going to offer today something to do to get you away from your computer and use your hands to just do some coloring and cutting. And we're going to make horns of Jericho. This is a story about blowing horns and bringing down the walls. So in your packet, you're going to get a sheet that looks like this, and it's a coloring. I'm going to encourage you to do mixed media, which means using two different things, like markers and colored pencils, or you could also add crayons into the mix. So you get to do some coloring using two different media, and then cut it out around the edge there, and you can see there's a dotted line. You're going to fold that edge, and then you're going to tape this. And you might need some helping hands on the taping part to make the horn of it. I put some blue tape right there to help me get it anchored. But you could also use Scotch tape. So then you've got your horn made. So if you want to send us a video of your horn and blowing your horn, please feel free to do so. Have a good week. And now we'll have communion.
As Jesus gathered with his disciples, he took the bread, broke it, and blessed it, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body broken for you."
And he took the cup and poured the juice and said, "This is my blood poured out for many. Do this in remembrance of me."
This is a spiritual. You can sing along. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. If you want to make noise like the walls are tumbling down, go right ahead. Grab something that you can make noise with, like this. Oh, yeah. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. You may talk about the men of Gideon, you may brag about the men of Saul, but there's none like good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. Up into the walls, Jericho, they marched with the spears in hand. Come blow them ram horns, Joshua said, 'cause the battle is in our hands. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. Then the lamb sheep horns began to blow, and the trumpets began to sound. And Joshua commanded the children to shout, and the walls come tumbling down. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down.
Okay, so if there's any walls that are dividing us this week, let's let those walls come a-tumbling down. And may the peace of Christ be with you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.